In the year 2054, the world had become a place where freedom was a relic of the past. Governments, in a bid to control the spread of a devastating pandemic, had instituted strict curfews. Citizens were allowed to leave their homes only once a day. Upon returning, they were locked in until the next day. If they left a second time, they would face immediate police pursuit and arrest. Lucas lived in this world of constant surveillance. He was an ordinary man with an extraordinary secret. One fateful day, his daughter, Emily, fell gravely ill. She needed urgent medical attention, and the nearest hospital was miles away. Lucas had already used his daily outing to gather groceries. He paced back and forth, his mind racing. He had to save Emily. Steeling himself, he decided to defy the curfew. As soon as he stepped outside, alarms blared from his house, notifying the authorities of his breach. Lucas sprinted through the alleyways, avoiding the main streets where police drones patrolled. He used every shortcut he knew, evading capture narrowly several times. His persistence paid off when he reached the hospital and handed Emily over to the doctors. But the return trip loomed over him. The streets were now swarming with police looking for him. Lucas knew he couldn't go back the same way. He remembered an old friend, Jason, who lived near the hospital. Desperate, he knocked on Jason's door, pleading for help. Jason, understanding the gravity of the situation, led Lucas to a hidden passage beneath his house, a relic from the days of the old subway system. They navigated the dark, labyrinthine tunnels until they reached an exit close to Lucas's home. Lucas realized that the old subway tunnels were off the grid. The government's surveillance didn't reach underground. He could use these tunnels to leave and return to his home undetected. Over the next few months, Lucas used this newfound loophole to go about freely, his movements invisible to the omnipresent eyes of the state. One evening, Lucas's neighbor, Mrs. Johnson, was gazing out her window. She noticed Lucas leaving his house twice in the same day. Her curiosity piqued. She started keeping track of his movements. After several days, she confronted Lucas, demanding to know his secret. Initially, Lucas was wary, but he sensed a genuine desperation in Mrs. Johnson's plea. Her husband was in dire need of medication, and the once-a-day curfew was a death sentence for him. Lucas decided to trust her. He showed her the entrance to the tunnels, teaching her how to navigate them. One night, as Lucas returned from one of his excursions, he found his home surrounded by police. Mrs. Johnson had betrayed him, thinking she could use the information to bargain for her husband's release, who had been arrested earlier for curfew violations. As Lucas tried to flee, he was cornered in an alley. In a desperate bid, he took a passing officer hostage, holding him at gunpoint. The situation grew tense as more police arrived, surrounding them. Lucas demanded safe passage for himself and Emily, who was still in the hospital. Amid the standoff, Jason arrived. He had been following the news and knew Lucas was in trouble. Using his knowledge of the tunnels, he created a diversion, causing a blackout in the area by sabotaging the power grid. In the chaos, Lucas managed to escape with Emily, guiding her through the tunnels. Lucas and Emily eventually found refuge in a remote area, far from the oppressive surveillance of the city. They were joined by Jason, who had managed to avoid capture. They lived in peace, using their knowledge of the tunnels to help others escape the city's grip. As for Mrs. Johnson, she realized the gravity of her mistake. Guilt-ridden, she sought to make amends. She began aiding the underground resistance, helping others find freedom just as Lucas had helped her. In the end, Lucas forgave her, understanding the desperation that had driven her actions. Together, they worked to undermine the oppressive regime, dreaming of a world where freedom was no longer a distant memory but a present reality.